Hello, everybody, and welcome to a podcast of biblical proportions. How many 3,000-year-old stories cause political problems? When in the late 19th century, British researchers deciphered a 4,000-year-old Sumerian poem called the Epic of Gilgamesh, it caused a political uproar. It was yet another example of how impactful the stories of the Bible have been throughout the history of the world. The British Prime Minister was asked to comment on an archaeological discovery of a character in the epic. His name was Utnapishtim, and his story seemed suspiciously similar to the divine tale of Noah from the Hebrew Bible. As Noah, Utnapishtim was tasked by a deity to build a big boat to save some people and animals from an incoming flood that would destroy everything. And that's not the only flood story out there. So in this episode, we'll discuss the origins, inspirations, and surprising global nature of the flood myth, which appears in cultures from Mesopotamia to Greece to Egypt, and all the way to China, India, Scandinavia, Polynesia, Africa, and the Americas. We'll focus, of course, on the Mesopotamian influence of this flood tale. Let's dive in. No pun intended. Hi, Omri.
Hi, Gil. It's a well-known fact that the emergence of civilizations and agricultural societies became much more prevalent after the end of the Ice Age, which was 10,000, 12,000 years ago. It was a great era of melting and rising sea levels. And there was also the distant memory that we see in the Ten Commandments with the Greek island that Santorini or something like that had a volcano that erupted about 6,000 years ago, and then it was a mini ice age, and sea level rose, and the Caspian Sea, which is very close to the cradle of the civilization, very close to Mesopotamia, was also much larger. Most of the epic tales and the creation stories, they have some secret of distant memory, as we keep repeating ourselves, of ancient, simpler times and even magical times. And here, the distant memory is a traumatic memory. We talked about it in one of the former episodes. The collapse of the Bronze Age. A very, very violent, day-to-day violence, as well as a geopolitical collapse. Imagine you wake up one morning and there's a headline, China fell. Just collapsed. Violently. People are killing each other inside of China. And a few weeks later, it's Russia. A month later, 2 years later, it's Germany. 10 years later, it's the United States, etc., etc. That's sort of what happened back then.
Wow.
And each time it was very violent. It wasn't just, okay, we ran out of food, bye-bye. It was always accompanied by great violence.
So to that point, if that apocalyptic scenario comes to pass, and it did come to pass in the late Bronze Age collapse, it will affect the entire way humanity tells stories. Mm-hmm. From that point on, for I don't know how many generations, stories will include some great disaster in some way or another, or they will become super Bollywood movies. Everything is fine, everything is awesome.
I think the magnitude of the violence created some kind of ripples of waves throughout the generation after that. It's no coincidence that the first introduction into the story of Noah is a tale about how people were so evil and they were corrupted, and the word is Hamas, which is corruption and violence and stealing and pillaging. Like we said in the episode about
Hamas is not the current Palestinian organization. This is the word Hamas in the text. Go.
Yeah. Like we said in the episode about the Garden of Eden, that it was some kind of a distant memory of the hunter-gatherer period or the early agricultural period when stuff were much simpler and there was some kind of a feeling of affluence. So here there's some kind of a post-traumatic stress disorder memory about evil people who are pillaging and raping and stealing and killing. And this is the context of the Noah story that we'll get.
And the Noah story again, so the context for the Noah story is the Utnapishtim story. So they don't feel like they need to invent anything new. This is not that kind of world. They're not trying to prove a fact. There's no science. This is just, everybody knows that this happened. Everybody knows, no. So, okay, this is how we say it happened.
The story of Noah is well known to everybody, I believe, about a guy that God spoke to him and told him that a flood is coming, a deluge, and that will wipe out all the evil men that became too evil for his own taste. So I believe that it's some kind of a story in the same manner as Shakespeare's plays were well-known stories that were just, let's say, animated or reenacted in a different way while claiming it in their own language.
Also, you can have like movies about Rome, about Greek gods, about Thor.
When Shakespeare writes Hamlet for a British audience with very memorable lines, it's actually a Danish tale which occurs like 500 years before, I think, the time that Shakespeare wrote it. So it's something like this. It's like a tale that is well known. It's also very common for people to have this some kind of a prehistoric notion of people who looked different and behaved different and followed different laws of physics. Maybe it has something to do with skeletons, maybe.
Skeletons?
Yeah.
Like remains?
Remains. Maybe, you dig some kind of a grave and you see men who are like 6 feet tall or 180 centimeters. The average height of the people back then with their diet was like I think 5 feet, maybe 5.5
but
feet.
Who are those 6 feet tall?
Hunter-gatherer. They were much larger. Yeah, their diet was with much more variety.
Yeah, diverse. Yeah,
diverse, much more protein. They didn't just eat grain or rice or just whatever they grow. I see it as some kind of a reclamation of a well-known story in the manner of Shakespeare and now Hollywood, basically, and to some extent Bollywood. Retelling a well-known story, a well-known fact. I don't think that people who listen to that story with the Noah character, I don't think the tale blew their minds in its originality. It was like, I know this tale, but this is the realer version of it. Yes. The real version of it, the more precise version of it, is the one in my language with my deity.
I would say that it's not that it's truer, like it's just there's this memory of flooding, and all these civilizations have the same thing. So there's the theory that it started 11,000 years ago when the glaciers started to melt. And then you had more waters and flooding all over in the Caspian Sea, and especially where civilizations rise, in between the rivers. So that could be one thing. But another thing, I had a theory. The Euphrates and the Tigris, the main rivers of Mesopotamia, they were flooding every year or two. And because they had like very high banks, apparently, when they flooded, it came out strong and just destroyed everything. Then all the minerals and stuff from the rivers, then everything could grow anew, and it's a new life.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just like this memory of flooding, destroying everything, and then a new life coming in. And in some ways, there was a repetitiveness in this, and we can see that there is repetitiveness in the stories that they tell. So I listened to a conversation with the person who translated the best version, according to people in the know, of the Gilgamesh epic tales to English. And there are all these repetitions over and over and over again in the text, like we see in the Bible. Just something that is popular in their culture because that life is more repetitive, while now there's this meme of all the older generation complain about the new generation because everything changes so quickly. This is our life experience, and this is projected in the art that we create. Their life experiences were so different. So when we see all these repetitions, it makes sense to try and see the beauty in it as they did, even though it seems silly. And I myself, I like repetitions. Like my favorite singer of all time is the Belgian great Jacques Brel. Most of his songs include repetitions upon repetitions upon repetitions. And there's beauty in it.
There's beauty in it. I like British grime, is the UK version of rap. And there's some...
British grime?
Grime is the UK version of rap.
Okay.
It's quite different. It's
Okay.
very raw. But there's also a technique of repetitions there, and I like it.
So in the Gilgamesh epic tales that were inscripted, unscripted, whatever, on stones,
Yeah. Something on stones.
Something,
Tick,
whatever.
tuk, tuk, tuk.
tick-tick-tooking on stones. So this is like the oldest story.
Carved.
So this is the oldest story that we have. It's incredible. And Gilgamesh is not the flood hero, but there's something interesting about Gilgamesh that is very passive for most of the story, which is like Noach. We're going to talk about it more in the next episode. And the way that we know about Utnapishtim, there might be countless of other stories about Utnapishtim, but just Gilgamesh goes to see him, and then he tells the story of what happened to him, and he won whatever. He can't die.
Yeah.
He's immortal
Yeah.
now. And Noach, similarly, maybe he's the last human who gets to live an extraordinary long lifetime. He lives to be 600 years old. His lifespan is not capped, but we'll talk about that more in the next episode.
And Noach is more of a tale about the deity that controls him, and his name, we will talk about it again in the next episode, is derived from the word comfortable or easygoing. He's not some kind of an epic hero. So here we have the reclamation here is not only a story that is well known. Maybe you don't even remember the name Utnapishtim or Gilgamesh, but you know that it's well-known fact that there was some kind of a flood and people were evil back then and they lived a long time. That is a well-known fact. For the smart people that are telling the story to you right now, then they give you details. The deity there is Yahweh/Elohim, and the hero is Noach, and he's not really a hero. So the message here is to downgrade the greatness of the humans. If Utnapishtim and Gilgamesh were great men, Herculean, who challenged death and the gods, then Noach is no. Noach is
because
he only follows orders, and he's very comfortable.
Yes, and Gilgamesh, he doesn't follow orders. He insults a goddess that tries to seduce him. First of all, I have a personal link to Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was my childhood nickname by my parents, Gilgamesh. So I ordered Omri a small statue of Gilgamesh. I'm going to put him right here on the thing. And your name, by the way, is also biblical, Omri.
Yeah, it's basically a king.
Great king.
A great king, a very successful king. And the name Omri is very... The name Omri. In the Jewish tradition, the religious Jewish tradition, is considered a very bad and evil king. His son is Ahab, so his line is tainted, if you will, by the Jewish tradition. But then came the Zionists, and they don't care. They were secular atheists, and they just wanted a pool of names from the Bible. And they said, okay, historically, this guy, Omri, is a great king. He had a dynasty that controlled the area for 40 years, and Israel, who was some kind of a blip between empires, became some kind of a mini player in the area. They had a great horse industry and great palaces, and some scholars say that the character of Solomon, the great wealth and foreign relations Solomon reign was some kind of a portrayal of the real Omri dynasty, and Omri dynasty appears in external sources.
Yes,
like back then they called areas according to the dynasty that controlled that area. So if Omri was king of Israel, then the area according to external sources by Babylonians or Assyrians was the Omri. Nice.
So the Epic of Gilgamesh not only inspired Noach, but also inspired the Iliad, the Odyssey, also because it was the story of an empire. This is a very local story of a local people that, as they're writing it, they're not players in the Game of Thrones or the Game of Cultures or anything.
They're aspiring actors, but they're
losers.
Not yet there.
After their death.
Yeah,
they'll gain recognition. They're like Van Gogh.
I think we need to talk about the perception of time. It's important if you say repetition and the fact that life is repetitive. The way that they perceived time was by seasons. Seasons are reoccurring, so time is not something that is advanced.
Right.
And when they count time by years, it's usually reigns of kings.
Yes.
There's not a perception of some kind of an arrow that
Yes.
is progressing.
This is also very new. This is Renaissance and
Exactly.
afterwards. This is very new. Okay, go
It's
on.
just something to keep in mind if you're trying to get into their
Right.
heads and into their shoes. Their cognitive perception of the world, of time itself, was repetitive.
Repetitive and
Constant.
And when you look way back in history, there was a disaster. So everything is the same, and in the rear view mirror, you see a disaster.
After it was much better than now. It's also some part of a perception of circular time instead of advancing time. In our perception, in the future will be much better. In a perception of a medieval, in medieval societies and primitive societies, when time is circular, back then was much better. People lived longer, they were more naive. They had a period of the very evilness and Hamas, but God took care of it. Everything's fine. You know what I'm saying?
So just to go over some of the similarities in the Utnapishtim story and the Noach story. So he has to take his family, and also his village, Utnapishtim, and then animals in couples. So this is like monogamist propaganda that we've been suffering for 10,000 years. And the boats,
maybe it was only monogamous to animals. Maybe so. Look at the animals; they are monogamous. Ugh.
Right, actually, because we're going to see Abraham
monogamous.
is where he wasn't monogamous. Okay. So the dimensions of the boats I read are like 3% apart.
Yeah.
So it's just like, and they use the term that they use in Hebrew, amot, cubist, I think it's in English, and it's amma, that's like your forearm.
Yeah.
From the elbow to the tip of your finger. This is the dimensions that they use for the boat. The way the water rises is the same, and with the birds, sending the birds 3 times, that's the same, and the way that God seals the ark, it's the way that the God Shamash that we talked about, the sun god, he seals the thing. And also to your point about reclamation, we could also see it as the Romans had their religion entirely based on the Greek religion. They didn't mind. It wasn't any less real. No, they are just like the new version of that. And this is the name. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
This is it. It's like the gods weren't as competing as they are now. And we're gonna see. We're gonna talk about it. That this Hebrew religion will gradually turn into being
a monotheistic
religion that rejects all other gods.
Polytheistic society, polytheistic theology gives a lot of room to different kinds of gods, and even a room to imagine all the gods as one god and all the gods as a face of the one god. So you can be a Roman that believes in Neptune and Jupiter, but also in Osiris and Ra in Egypt. Like you know that their power is much more stronger there, or the sun god in
India. When I was there during Christmas 10 years ago, everybody wished me Merry Christmas on the street. Because it's fine. And also you had Hindus going to Buddhist temples in the north and stuff. They don't mind. It's just, okay, another god.
Japanese, they when they marry in a Christian wedding, and when they go to a funeral, they go to a Buddhist funeral, and when they open up a new house or something like that, then they do a Shinto. But that's because they're heathens.
So another thing that I read about, that the Hebrew word for ark, teva, which is kind of weird because teva for us like a case.
Yeah, like a box.
Like a small box or something. It doesn't have to be small, but...
it's the thing that Moses was put into when they put him in the Nile River.
Right,
they put in a teva.
Okay, so apparently it comes from the Egyptian word tabat, which is a box, usually a casket. So they're floating in a casket. Death is floating over death. This is amazing. And last point for me, so it says that at the end that they reach the mountains of Ararat.
Yeah, which are in Turkey now or Armenia.
Yeah, it switched. They moved. At first,
that's quite interesting, that factoid, because it's pretty far. Maybe it tells us about the radius of the original story. If they know from here in the mountains near Jerusalem, where 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 kilometers away from there, the mountain of Ararat, which is probably quite famous back then circle that radius, and you will find the cultural playground of their culture.
And so I wanted to finish the point about the Egyptian word tabat. So maybe they didn't even copy the story from Utnapishtim. They copied it from the Egyptians, who copied it for everybody had these stories. They had the Nile flooding and the same thing, and they had the story, and then so it's like everything is like different shades. Of the same thing. It's like the Celtic are similar to the Gauls, are similar to the Germans, are similar to the Scandinavians.
And even the word copying is sort of misleading and anachronistic. It's not copying, because there were no
copyright laws.
Copyright laws. And I think even in the perception, it's more like, imagine you see Julius Caesar by Shakespeare. And you see the Marcus Antonio's speech after the funeral, or even the moment of the murder when he says "Et tu, Brutus." There's no historical fact that he actually said it, but probably 5 or 6 movies or adaptation of that story will use "Et tu, Brutus," or even some kind of a throwback into that, or some kind of intertextual throwback into the original Et tu, Brutus.
So in the HBO Rome series, they didn't have that, but after he kills him, there is a line from Shakespeare when he says thus to all tyrants.
Yeah,
that also supposedly wasn't said. So that's
the same scene that they murder him. He gives Brutus a look. And you, as the viewer, you're waiting him to say "Et tu, Brutus," because you think it's an historical. It's a well-known fact that he said "Et tu, Brutus." So it's the same, and "Et tu, Brutus" he says in Latin, but the entire film, even Shakespeare and Rome by HBO, is in English. So you have a reclamation, and the actors are Anglo-Saxons. They don't have long noses and they don't speak with their hands. So what the fuck?
They're Jewish, supposed to be?
No, Italians have long noses. Look at their statues.
Yes.
Long noses.
So in that scene, after he's dead, there was like a double play. So first of all, it's not Brutus who says thus to all tyrants. It's someone next to him, and he doesn't say "Sic semper tyrannis." He says it in English. So it's like 2 layers removed, and you as a viewer, there's like a nod to all the layers between the original story and the way that you remember it because of all the adaptations.
So here it's not for an educated audience who will see all the intertextual and the meta, hints and Easter eggs.
But it's there.
It's there, but imagine like a story that is, again, well-known, but here are the truer and more real details. It was actually Noach, and it was actually Yahweh, not Utnapishtim, or if you even remember that name. The story that you know is with Noach. That's it.
Okay, so one final thing for Netflix. I want something for Netflix. So Gilgamesh, he has a partner in the story named Enkidu. Enkidu, that's such a cool name. Enkidu. I want a show, a children's show. Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Gilgamesh and Enkidu. I want to watch it. just hearing the name. Awesome.
If some of you have connections with Netflix, set us up with a pitch meeting.
Okay. So in the next episode, we'll go over the story, how it is told. Yeah. There's loads of stuff to unpack. It's incredible how it's basically a story of 2 deities doing it, not one, of 2 different peoples. So check that one next week. And if you want to see the accompanying page for this episode with all kinds of pictures and arts that can add to the overall experience and help to visualize it, check out our website, podcast of biblicalproportions.com. Scroll down a bit. There's a section, episode media. And tell your friends and...
Tell your mama.
Tell you... and tell your gods. Tell your gods.
No,
So we'll see you all.
don't tell your gods.
And we'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.